Hey everyone, this is Josh from Solopreneur Grind for episode 102 of the Solopreneur Grind podcast, and I'm lucky to be joined by Christopher Burns. He's the founder of menmastermind.com. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Josh, thank you for being here, man, and thank you for leading the way, shining some light for entrepreneurs, solopreneurs who are on their journey of self-mastery and creating better results in their life, brother.
Awesome. I think it'll be a great episode because based on what you've been working on, what you currently work on, I think it's really important and fitting, especially for kind of my listeners and our kind of ethos. Can you tell everybody, those who might not know who you are, a little bit about yourself and what you're working on these days?
Yeah, absolutely, man. So you might see me today grow in this community, the Men Mastermind community, traveling the world. I moved to Tulum, Mexico with my wife just about a little over a month and a half ago from Las Vegas. We were there for a couple of years, grew up in Southern California, but I love to speak, host retreats. We got one coming up in about a month. And I love to just empower people to reconnect with I like to call it the source within, the God within, not getting too spiritual or woo-woo, but I believe there's some kind of power within each of us that we get to tap into, our intuition, our higher self, whatever we want to call it. So it's my mission to support men specifically right now in coming together in community, challenging ourselves, raising the bar on each other, and mastering our purpose, our power, and prosperity so we can be the greatest contribution in the world that we can possibly be.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great kind of mission and vision. Really quick selfish question. What's it like living in Tulum? Because I'm up in Canada. As you know, it gets a little chilly here in the winter. And for years I've been saying I want to go spend a month of the winter, living in Mexico, in Central or South America, same time zone, much warmer weather. Recommended? Not recommended? What would you say?
Strongly recommend.
Yeah.
And I will say that specifically for me because I never thought I would ever move out of California, let alone move into a different country. But my wife, she's from Czech Republic in Europe, and she lived in Spain for 4 years, fluent speaker in Spanish. And when she came to the US, she just had this global mindset, and borders weren't they're not really a thing that stops us from going and exploring and adventuring. And in fact, there's richness, there's rewards from going and experiencing other cultures, not just intellectually and psychologically, but also, energetically, DNA wise in our body, like DNA getting activated from different places and cultures. But dude, it's epic. Highly recommend it, man.
Awesome. Okay. I might have to ping you offline for some recommendations closer to when we start booking. Anyways, let's get down to business, Chris. My first question is, what was the beginning of your career like? Because what you're doing now is obviously not something you specifically go to college or university for, right? And that's not to say it's not incredible, right? It's just I'm always very curious to hear about people's journeys to getting to really cool and unique professions or careers, whatever you want to call them. What did you do in college and university, if anything at all? And then what was kind of the first few years of your career like? And this is a loaded question, how did it kind of lead to where you are now? And maybe we can break that up in pieces if it makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So school was electrical engineering degree. I got a bachelor's in electrical engineering. I think I saw that you were in law, or you have some kind of law background. So it's a very technical background, but I grew up with a lot of desire for freedom, and went through my raving phase, went to a bunch of festivals, EDM, things like that. And it was just a wild time in my life, really being rebellious against my parents. I don't know if you know much about human design, but one of my qualities, it's a personality typing system. And one of the qualities is being someone who likes to go experiment and experience life. And so one aspect of me didn't like people telling me what to do. And I was like, no, I want to go experience life on my own. And so wound up hitting some rock bottoms in my life. I actually got arrested at a rave, spent 2 days in Southern California, San Bernardino County Prison. And that was really my wake-up call, Josh. I had my degree, but I felt like I was throwing away my life, felt like the biggest disappointment to my parents. It was really a tough spot in my life. It was about a decade ago now. And I was in this place, and I said, universe, guide me through this. I'm clearly messing everything up. I have a lot of potential, a lot of talent, a lot of gifts, but I'm clearly taking it for granted, taking life for granted, taking freedom for granted, taking the blessings that I've been given for granted. And so it was from that moment, after getting through that, and thankfully charges were dropped, case was dismissed, nothing ever went on my record. But it was from that pain and feeling of like, man, I'm a total screw up. From that pain, I was like, man, if other people are feeling lost or going down the wrong path, trying to figure out their life, and they're just getting caught up with bad people, addictions, or whatever it might be, like it's a world that literally programs us to be addicted and to hurt ourselves, harm ourselves in different ways. And so it's from that point where I was like, okay, I'm going to dedicate myself to being the best version of myself. Hired a life coach, hired business coaches, and just set out on this journey of mastering myself, creating financial freedom and things like that, so I can do what I want when I want and experience life to the fullest.
Very cool. And so how did those first couple months look like when you had hired some of those coaches and decided to make the turnaround? Did you have any idea of what you wanted to do, how you wanted to do it? Was it with their help? And how did you ultimately come to what you're focused on now?
Yeah, so the portion that really stuck out for me, Josh, was this feeling of total lacking of clarity, but knowing that I got to change something. And I'm sure our listeners can really resonate with this. Someone tuning in right now, they can feel, man, I've been in this place in my life at some point, maybe not right now, but at some point where it's like things have to change. Like I cannot continue to tolerate the circumstances. There's too much pain, there's too much suffering, there's too much grief, there's too much anxiety, whatever it is. And we just say no more, right? And I found that decision moment for me was one of the most powerful things that I could do, to just, whether it's a big drastic change or a decision to say, no, I'm going to start inching the other way, putting myself into better situations, doing personal development and growth. But for me, that very first portion, I had already been doing some personal development. So thankfully I had a little bit of a foundation, but I knew I had to change things and work on myself, become a better version. I started going to Toastmasters. I would say that was one of the best decisions I could have ever made, because it gave me a community to go and meet with every single week. It was a pretty prestigious club in Southern California. And thankfully I had mentors and people there who guided me. And I hired my first life coach from Toastmasters. And his name was Lee Adams. He'd run a multi-7-figure business in the 80s and 90s. It was an electronics store in Southern California. And when I met him, he was in his journey of healing from cancer. And he was battling it, healing from it. And so I worked with him for about 6 months. And there was this period of time where I went off on my own, was doing door-to-door sales for Verizon, just creating whatever income I could. And about a year later, I found out that he had passed. And it was for me one of those moments that hit home. It's like, man, this guy spent his final breaths and final moments pouring into people, supporting people as a coach, as a leader, as a mentor. It's like, man, I want my legacy to make that kind of an impact, how he did on me, to guide me, someone who was kind of lost and didn't know who I was or what I stood for. And he helped me to really find out what are the basics, really mastering the basics. And through community and mentorship, I really got set on that right track, Josh.
Very cool. Very cool. What would you say, Chris, were some of the keys to helping you start a business? Because what a lot of our listeners are, maybe they're working a 9-to-5 they don't like, maybe they just quit a 9-to-5 they don't like, maybe they've taken some steps toward a side hustle or anything like that. What do you think were some of the first few really important things that allowed you to start bringing in that financial freedom, working towards a revenue or an income that was heading in the right direction?
The big thing that I learned is really to go out and test my ideas, find out what people actually want. I think I was listening to your 50th episode, and you were doing like a review on a couple of the principles and lessons of that you picked up in business and the podcast and stuff. And you're talking about like the market, knowing your niche, that kind of thing. And you're also talking about like go out and practice, go out and try, go out and see if people are willing to bite, people are willing to go for it. And thankfully I've been involved in personal development communities basically since I started, right? Like that's how I got into personal development, is through a network marketing company. And there's a big focus on community there. And so all throughout, I've had communities that I could bounce ideas off of. And so I started personally with copywriting services on Fiverr. And I just was writing for copywriting and just developing my communication abilities there. But then I hired my first business coach. That was before I hired a business coach. I hired my first business coach, and he's like, man, you've learned all this personal development. Why don't you package it up and put it into something that's really affordable and that people can get benefit from? So I created a 40 days, 40 nights e-course kind of thing that was drip delivered by mail for $40, right? Just like, hey, let's get this thing started. Super like no brainer deal, right? It was easy for people to get into and get access, get value from. So from that built up my confidence. And then from the confidence, which is super important, I think it's highly underrated for a lot of entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. Building confidence, building up our ability to prepare for situations and know that we can handle them when they come our ways. That's big from transitioning from being someone who's a 9-to-5er, which I was doing, and doing industrial electronics repair, and also working multiple different jobs. And I said, okay, well, how do I become an entrepreneur? How do I get that mindset? And there was a lot of imposter syndrome. There was a lot of, can I really do this? Who am I to offer coaching? And all these things that came up that blocked me. But one of the biggest things that I could do is go out and take action to start to build my confidence. I could also know my product. I can know my customer. I can know the value that I deliver. And those were some really important things to build my confidence in the beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's only so much prep you can do, right? And prep is important, and market research and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, until you throw it out there into the market and, see what happens, see what people say, see what people do with their credit card or don't do with their credit card, you're just going to be guessing and doing a lot of research for a long time. Chris, can you talk a little bit about, from a lot of that testing and putting yourself out there, like, if you could give maybe one or two tips of what you learned that did work or didn't work that might save some of our listeners some testing. Any conclusions that you came to, or what worked, what didn't work, what ultimately allowed you to continue to grow and get to the next step in your business?
Yeah. The big thing that I see, Josh, is knowing who you're talking to, because at the end of the day, a business is run by an exchange between people, right? Even if you have a e-commerce store or online store or web checkout or whatever it might be, it's still being done with another person. The person is making buying decisions. So for me, I had a style that I just cared about people, and I would go the extra mile in serving them up front and demonstrating that I'm living what I'm teaching, especially as a coach. It's like you really get to be embodying the expertise and the things that you're sharing about. But ultimately, it's like being confident in communicating with, hey, I know who this person is, and I'm here to serve. I'm here to add value first. I think a lot of people are so focused on getting that they don't focus on giving first. And I think that's especially as an entrepreneur starting out, if there's a looming, if there's looming bills that we have to pay for, then that can put pressure on us that makes it more about the sale than about serving, than about the person. And so for me, I knew who I was talking to. I built relationships with them previously. That's another thing I'd really recommend to people, is don't burn bridges. I had a woman who I went to her networking event. It was where my first business coach was speaking at, and this woman was hosting it. And I built up a great relationship with her, checked in with her over about 6 years, a couple times, right? Maybe 3 or 4 times. And she saw my podcast when I was doing my 12-hour live stream where I interviewed like 800 guests over about 3.5 years. And so she saw me on that consistently, which is valuable. Like, you make sure that people are seeing you. But 6 years later, she hires me to come in and teach on a Zoom training for her organization, and teach her sales reps and teach them some goal setting and things like that. As around New Year's. And so 6 years later, man, it's a 6-year lead time between the time I met her and the time it manifested into a deal. So really having that long-term, long game thinking. I know Gary Vaynerchuk talks a lot about like the long game, and don't be here for the next year, right? Don't be in this game of entrepreneurship for the next year. Be about this for the rest of your life. Become the person who's devoted to these principles and the outcomes and the lifestyle for the rest of your life, because it's gonna soften some of the failures, right? It's like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
knowing, man, it's not about just this little sprint of 3 months or 6 months or 12 months. It's about really building something that's going to last a long time. And I found a lot of grace for myself and patience by doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I think, investing time into networking, into building a personal brand or, corporate or company brand, either or both, posting on social media, stuff like that. It's such a long-term, a positive long-term investment. And the best part is you never know the benefits you could reap down the road. What could happen from like probably something that's really cool that I've experienced with the podcast or with, like, I have my personal email list is, you can go weeks or months and you'll be posting or emailing and you might not hear anything, but then a random person you've never heard of before, or somebody that you do know but didn't know has been following you for so long, reaches out, and now it's the right time where they need your help and the stars align and everybody's happy, right? So you never know what could happen and when. Chris, as someone who's done far more interviews than me, I like to think that I've done a fair amount of interviews. We're in the triple digits now for the show, but you're in like the multiple triple digits. What I've found is, after about like 20 or 30 interviews, I really started to pick up on some themes. Like a lot of successful solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, you'll pick up that a lot of them have some of the same things in common, right? You kind of like notice these patterns. Like, for example, a lot of guests on this show have done Toastmasters, as you've just mentioned, right? So you kind of pick up on these themes. Can you talk to any themes from interviewing, I think you said 800 plus people on your own show, so I still got some work to do, but maybe like 2 or 3 themes that you noticed from interviewing that many people that, some like common, maybe it's characteristics or behaviors or morning routines or God knows what, that a lot of successful people seem to be doing?
Yeah. So what I've noticed, one is pain is the greatest motivator, right?
Mm,
People in pain is what causes innovation, is what causes entrepreneurship, is what causes people to no longer stay in the status quo and say, F that, I'm moving up, I'm moving to something
right.
better, because humanity, as a human being, I don't deserve to just sit in this. Oftentimes it feels like prison of a 9 to 5. That's like the biggest one. But health challenges, things like that, it's pain that causes people to say, man, other people need to know how to navigate this better. So I'd say number one is welcome pain, because it's going to be one of your greatest teachers and motivators. And a lot of people are trying to, especially in the spiritual community, trying to bypass pain and only focus on the positive. And it's a surefire way to get blindsided and just sabotage yourself by not dealing with reality. And I think I've seen on your website, like, truth is something that's very important to you. So that's I'll share another thing is the people who I felt the most strong connections with and built the longest relationships with was a foundation of truth, was a common value of ours. And everyone has different values, different core values of what motivates them. But as for me, I found the people that I resonated with is people who value truth and value integrity, and of course, joy and love and community connection, things like that. But my invitation for our listener right now, or someone watching, is to know what are your values and build a life where you are fulfilling those values and you have people around you who are also committed to those same values. The people who had the greatest success in their businesses knew how to sort and sift and select the right people who had aligned values as them, and they teamed up with those people. They said, no, you're on my team. My vision is worth it. Your vision is worth it. We're going to figure it out. I don't know how it's all going to work out. I don't know how the compensation, the energetic or monetary exchange or whatever it might be, I don't know how that's going to work out, but we're committed to figuring it out. As long as it feels good, as long as, and feel good, fun, that's kind of like a byproduct of being aligned in values. But ultimately, as long as we're both growing and becoming better versions of ourselves, then that's a really big one. So being
Right.
committed to your values would be the second one. And the third thing that I've noticed is starting and jumping into a position of leadership before you're ready, right? These people who had businesses and built successful brands, coaching businesses and empires and things like that, real estate portfolios, they jumped into a leadership position before they had all the answers, and they figured it out. And that's something I learned from Toastmasters, is like taking on these leadership positions in Toastmasters to become the secretary, the vice president education, the president who runs the club. Like I moved up the ladder really quickly because I was hungry and I was committed to jumping into these leadership positions. Also on personal development seminars and things like that, I would ask, hey, how can I be a part of the crew, right? The team who sets up and breaks down the event and does all the behind the scenes stuff. And I noticed a lot of people who I interviewed, they were willing to volunteer. They were willing to put in the extra hours. They were willing to become a leader first by being a student and being willing to learn and not needing to have all the answers figured out. So jumping into that leadership position, also being a student in the process, was another big principle that I noticed.
Right. And it kind of overlaps with your first point, right? Because if you're jumping into positions maybe too early, you're going to have that added, natural fear. Maybe it's more nervousness than fear, but that's going to help push you, and you'll certainly move that much quicker. So that makes a lot of sense. So Chris, let me jump back to your story where you just said, you know what, I'm going to put this 40-day package together. I'm going to try selling it for $40. How did that go? And then what happened next?
Yeah, so I would say within the first month or two, I made probably about a couple dozen sales on that, and I was like, okay, this is a great result. It's time to grow from here. It's time to do even more. And so I started doing one-on-one coaching. Started offering people one-on-one coaching to be able to serve them and empower them more effectively, because I'd validated, hey, this information is what people are wanting, right? People want to solve these challenges. They want to have a better entrepreneurial mindset. They want to overcome their challenges. And so I moved into the one-on-one coaching. I started hosting local meetup events and just like free events for people to come to kind of also sharpen my sword. Sharpen my iron sword, so to speak, in the fire, on the field, in real time. So that's another thing about the leadership principle is go out there and host something, host an event, whether you're a coach or whatever, host an event for people who are with similar values, similar interests as you, whether it's in person or online. So I started hosting those. And then I hosted a retreat a couple of years ago in Bali with my wife, now wife. She was my girlfriend at the time. But then retreats and doing masterminds. I've always loved like group coaching programs and things like that. But men mastermind, that's really my bread and butter. The thing I love most is our elite men mastermind, where guys come together, meet twice a week, and it's really focused on, hey, what are you getting done? What's the focus for this week? And also doing some deep dive, hot seats, and challenging them to step into their power, step into their potential, and become better versions of themselves. So that's kind of the evolution. I wrote 2 books in the process, but never got published due to challenges in my last relationship and partnership. But it was all perfect, and so now I'm in the process of writing the next book, Mastering the Man Within. That's the title of my current podcast, and really just here to empower and serve men to make a difference and step into their power.
Absolutely, yeah, that's really cool. In terms of the in-person events, how did those go? Is that something that immediate interest and a whole bunch of people showed up at the first one? What would you recommend if someone's sitting, listening, watching this right now and saying, you know what, I would like to give that a try? What do you recommend they do even for a first event? I'm assuming keep it simple, but how does that look like in practice?
Yeah, so it's really get clear on the outcome of the event. What pain is it saving? What problem is it solving, right? Like why are people going to want to come? Get clear on that first. And then the next thing is find your key leaders, like who's going to be a part of it. Whether it's talent or speakers or trainers who are going to come and speak and add value, or just people who are passionate about what you do, right? Like loyal followers or people in your circle who are committed to supporting you or love your content or whatever it might be. Really find those key people, identify who those are, announce to them, let them say, like invite them to be a part of it at a bigger level, whatever that looks like, whether it's just promoting it on their stories or if it's helping to create it somehow or add value or be a part of the team somehow. I love building teams, right? And again, that's not for everyone. So I think it's also know what is your skill set, know what your genius. Some people, their genius might be putting together teams. I wouldn't say that's my genius, but I like to do it. And some people might really love to write the copy or to build the back end and build the system. So I would get really clear on what are your strengths, identify what that is, and then find people to really step up into those weakness areas where you're not great at. And I think that's really important is if someone's first starting out on their speaking career or podcasting career, whatever it might be, chances are they're not the world's best orator, right? Or teacher or trainer or coach. And so finding someone who's a really great communicator, someone who's amazing at entertaining, find someone who's going to wow your crowd so that they want to learn more, opt in, whatever it might be to keep getting more information.
Right. How did those first few events go, Chris? Like, were you surprised? Were you impressed? What were the outcomes for you, or what were your desired outcomes?
Yeah, so the first, especially the free events, I had around like 30 people, between 30 and 40 at each one. Yeah, so it was in the age, it was about 5 years ago or so when meetup.com was still really hot. I don't know where it's at today, but I know a couple of years ago it was really kind of this blossoming platform to host events on, and people were searching for these events. So for me, those first couple ones had about a couple dozen people that were at each one, which was great. And so that was a great kind of foundation to build upon. And one of my challenges, I'll be real with you, Josh, is staying consistent with things. So I like to juggle all these different plates. And so I would jump from the events, which had this momentum, to being like, oh no, let's go do online show now, And so
right.
That's something that I would definitely recommend for people is stick with things. Oftentimes it's difficult to do unless there's some level of external accountability. At least I know for me as coming from 9 to 5 and school system where I was constantly being told what to do, and I was really good at being a student and memorizing and regurgitating information. I was amazing at it. So to be a leader and stick with things and be self-motivated and self-directed, that was a bigger challenge for me, man. But I found my accountability or the support to put that leg in for support was through coaching, was through mentorship and communities, and especially declaring things on my public Facebook and things like that, where I said, hey, I'm going for this goal, I'm doing this thing. That was a really great way for me to support myself. So so the events, they were good in the beginning, and I probably took my foot off the gas of them a little early. And my painful lesson from that is keep sticking with things. Like I did with my marathon for 3.5 years, the 12-hour live stream. I did that for 3.5 years and got to interview 800 guests, which is freaking amazing, right? Because I learned that lesson. I learned that lesson of, hey, don't take your foot off the gas so quick,
Mm-hmm. I don't know what's more impressive, 12-hour live streams or 800 interviews in 3 to 4 years. That's really awesome. Chris, I want to spend the last couple minutes talking a little bit more about the masterminds. So how did you go from the events? Like, did that kind of evolve slowly into the mastermind group? And then if you wouldn't mind just talking a little bit about... Now, mastermind groups have become very popular, I think, in the last few years, at least kind of in the areas that I keep my eye on. But for those who might not know what they are, or I'm also curious to hear about what the format of your mastermind groups are, because everyone's a little bit different. So how did those events kind of evolve into what you're doing now, these mastermind groups, and what exactly is it for those of us who might not know?
Sure. So the events evolved into this 12-hour live stream that I did because it was just really convenient to do from my own house. I'm a techie. I again played to my strengths of doing this show for 12 hours every Wednesday. And
12 hours. Jeez.
Yeah, dude, it was epic. We had like call-in hours, accountability call-in hours. We had tons of special guests. There was usually 8, 9, or 10 guests on a weekly basis. I was doing solo teaching hours, coaching hours. Like it was a blast, man. So that was epic. But what happened was I left my previous business partnership, right? And that's where I had created that 12-hour live stream. We created that. And so I said, and that was in April of last year in 2020, right? When COVID was hitting. And it took me about the summer to really kind of regain my composure. I was kind of like grieving it, man. I was really sad that this 5-year partnership had come to an end. But I was also like, okay, what's going to be next? And one of the things that I felt had never been fully fulfilled in my previous company was a sense of community, right? And so I was like, man, I'm really hungry for community. I'm hungry for people around me who challenge me and who I get to challenge, and we grow together because of it. And I found in my journey of entrepreneurship, like being super real with you, man, my greatest suffering came when I disconnected myself and I hid and I didn't connect with people. I didn't reach out. I didn't ask for help. And I know a lot of men have a challenge with thinking they need to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. They need to be lone wolves. They need to figure it out all together. And so I said, man, I don't want any more guys to suffer with this self-sabotage. It's a form of self-sabotage. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? So I started with a Facebook group. I did a challenge in October of last year. And from that, just built that Facebook group. And around the new year of 2021, this year, I said, man, I'm committed to launching a mastermind, like more intimate, more committed, people who are really playing at a higher level. And so it originally started out with 6 calls a week. And it was insane, man. It was,
wow.
it was like 12-hour live stream, hard, just everything I do hardcore, and there's value in that, and there's also value in minimal investment for maximum return, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a hit in the beginning for a lot of the guys, and then we pivoted in the summer and we're like, hey, these 6 calls, it's great, but let's condense it all because it's too many calls to get on, right? Because each call covered a different area. We covered sales, we covered just business in general, we covered goals, we covered health, we covered relationships, and then we also had a fun call where we just get on and do fun things and connect with guys, And so that transition, and now it's a 2-call structure. And so the first call of the month or of the week is a goal setting call. Getting clear on, hey, here's our targets for the week. Here's where we need support, really rallying the guys together to support each other. We have accountability partners, and they jump on a call once a week with each other to just share where they're at, what they're struggling with, what they need support with. And then Wednesday nights, so that one's at 10 a.m. Pacific on Monday, the first call, the goals call. And then the Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, that's more of the deep dive call, the hot seat call, bringing in experts, trainers, people to teach the guys. And so it's just those 2 calls on a weekly basis, and there's group chats and things like that. But I'd say that's the kind of the bread and butter, is really getting clear on what are the top priorities and declaring those, right? Having that community accountability. That's what the Monday serves for. And then the Wednesday is more of like, hey, let's go deep. Let's find out, what are you really struggling with? What are the blocks? And let's bring in powerful teachers and trainers to be able to shift what we're learning about. We've had experts on crypto, experts on personality types, so that we know who we are and who we best work with, and a lot of other great teachers, masculine energy experts. So yeah, man, it's been a really powerful experience, and just about building that brotherhood and not doing this journey on our own.
Absolutely. What do you think, Chris, are the most common struggles that you see a lot of the members of the mastermind group dealing with, and maybe 1 or 2 tips on what you recommend to them to overcome them?
The formula that we teach in our Mastered Man curriculum, which I have for one-on-one coaching, and I also bring it into the Elite Men Mastermind, is the purpose, power, and prosperity. So really knowing your purpose, discovering what that is, activating your power, being able to be someone who's empowered, and you have powerful language, powerful energy, powerful physiology, all these things to activate your power and get results that you want. And the last one is prosperity, right? So purpose, power, and prosperity. And those are the 3 biggest areas that guys are struggling with. a lot of people, a lot of guys have no idea what their purpose is. They're lacking clarity on it. They don't know who they are, what they stand for, their values, what they're willing to live and die for, right? A lot of guys are really struggling with that. And I don't blame them. You know, we're conditioned to follow directions and live life according to someone else's prerogative, you know, and their vision for our life. So really, number one is discovering your own vision, and there's a lot of different exercises for that. But number one, I would say finding out what you stand for and what you stand against. Right. So think about the injustices that are going on in the world. That's usually the place that trigger us the most, and make a list of 10 to 20 of those injustices. You know, what do I stand against? What do I see that's going on in the world that I do not tolerate? Right. And if it happened in front of me, I would do something about it. I would stand up against that cause. So that's stand against, and then also stand for. What do I stand for? What's important to me? What are people or experiences or memories in my life where I stood up for something. I said, this is important to me. So knowing what your values are, what your purpose is, that's one. The second one is going to be power. And so some guys may know who they are and what they stand for, what their values are, but they're not living by those. And they actually are living beneath their potential, and they're trying to people please, and they're not speaking up, and they're not living a life that's true to them, right? And so it's a lot of men have been conditioned into mediocrity and just following what everyone else says, following what the crowd is doing. And it takes freaking courage, man, to live in our truth, to live in our values and what's important to us. So a big part of that is really mastering our body, our mind, and our spirit, right? Our body, mind, and our emotions. Knowing, okay, if I have trauma and things that I'm repressing from the past, that's going to show up in how I execute in my business, right? It's like our business is just an extension of us, right? Our business is a function of us and how we're thinking and how we're seeing the world. So if we don't address those things, then we're going to sabotage our business. We're going to do things to hamstring ourselves. So knowing what are the routines and rituals that get us into power. It's another big thing that we cover. And then lastly is prosperity, man. A lot of guys really struggle with this money chasing attitude. They're constantly chasing money. They're chasing freedom. They're looking to someday, some destination, because the masculine likes to finish things, likes to complete things, likes to get to the goal. And life is not that way. Like, it's a sheer series of short sprints, right? But ultimately, I find the guys who are the most prosperous are the ones who are enjoying the journey, who are embracing the whole entire journey. So that would be my suggestion, is to how do you live in this moment and not need to get somewhere or do something or get some amount of money or get a house or get a certain place in your business. You know, so how many commas do you need before you're actually happy, right? And so I would really start with that inner happiness and inner peace first, and then everything else will follow after it.
Absolutely. That's great advice. I mean, you pretty much just outlined like a plan that people could kind of implement right now. If you go through those three things and, you know, maybe do some journaling or point form listing. Heck, I might have to do it this weekend. But that's really great advice, Chris. One last question, and I'm going to ask it in a shorter form than I normally ask it because you just kind of gave a really good answer to it already. But usually my last question is, what would you tell someone right now who's maybe working a 9 to 5, they're not happy, they know there's something better out there for them, they're not living up to their potential, kind of like you talked about. Now, I think that the long answer should be to go through exactly what you just said. But if you maybe had 30 seconds, could give one piece of advice to that person, what would that be?
The piece of advice I would give, Josh, is you take yourself with you wherever you go. So if you haven't cleaned up the out of integrity, the incompletions in your life, the lies, the dishonesty, the traumas, the wounds, whatever from the past that you are carrying into this moment, if you do not deal with that, wherever you go next, you're going to carry that with you. And if you're miserable in your current job or career or complaining or whatever it might be, you're going to bring that with you. I don't care how amazing your dream job or career or position is that you're moving into. When you get the, millions of dollars, whatever it might be, you will take those habitual ways of thinking and being with you, and it will sabotage and eat away at that joy and that happiness and freedom and peace. So do the inner work, man. That's what I got to say.
It's a great piece of advice, and it's a great note to end on. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show. If people want to learn more about you or the mastermind find or get in touch, where do you recommend that they go?
Yeah, a couple different places. Instagram, Christopher Colin Burns. That's Colin with two L's, I-N, Collin, Christopher Colin Burns. And then facebook.com/TH3 Burns. That's facebook.com/TH3 Burns. I'm always posting content on there. But if you want to check out my website, it's menmastermind.com. And you can see some of the latest podcast episodes and things that we got going on there. And yeah, man, it's an epic journey. And Josh, I really, really appreciate you, man. Appreciate the questions, appreciate how you stand up for entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and people who are lone wolves, right? Like solopreneur is naturally someone who is doing this journey and trying to figure everything out, right? In the beginning, we have to wear all the different hats. And so I really appreciate you bringing to light that we don't have to do this on our own and that we can lean on others and team up and create like teams to be able to accomplish bigger goals. So love what you're doing, man. Super powerful.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Thank you again for coming on the show. We're going to link to all of those things that you just mentioned in the description if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on whatever podcast platform you might be listening on. Chris, thanks again for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate you, brother.